What's going on, everybody?
Hey there.
Welcome to the Bold Women Podcast. How you doing? Well, I hope you're all right. My name is Meryl, and I'm here with my friend Maria.
Hi. That's me.
And boy, have we got a topic for you today.
Yes, we do.
Yes and amen.
Yes and amen.
But first.
Did you, while we're on the topics of topics, I have a topic.
Okay.
Social media. And we are on it.
Oh.
Yep. Find us. Our podcast. So, but you find us on podcast. Why don't you think we would be on?
We're on Apple
Spotify.
Podcasts or
Apple
Spotify.
Podcasts or Spotify. There's the good old Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Go for the Instagram.
Yeah.
Be honest about it. But
That's
now,
gone to the wayside.
back to our topic of topics.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about comparison.
What?
Yeah,
Say it's not so?
it is.
Shoot.
So, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Well, everyone's familiar with this topic,
Yeah.
but we're just going to dig into it. So, you may be familiar with the quote, "The grass is always greener." You heard that one, Weiler?
I have. And
Yeah.
green is my favorite color.
Well,
So,
with seemingly endless access to information, we are able to, filter out things that are most pleasing or interesting to us. Then we, get on social media, get to scrolling through images of friends or strangers, living their apparent perfect best lives, without a care in the world. Life is always going well for them. They're doing all the things that we want to do,
Yup.
but we can't seem to find time for. And then, pivot to like church. You get to know some people who at the offset, appear to be the poster family for everything you've ever wanted
never
in
do
life.
anything wrong.
Yeah, but for whatever, they have the perfect children.
Yup.
They have the best pets. They have everything is
Perfect
just
house.
golden.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it just hasn't happened for you yet. Like take the workplace, a coworker who often does a better job appearing to be busy rather than actually doing the most quality work on a project, gets publicly recognized for their great accomplishments while you take inventory on everything you've ever contributed and your name is never mentioned. When good things seem to be happening for, everyone but us, it's an easy way to allow jealousy and envy to take root in our hearts. The question is kind of like, is this an area in which you struggle with in this season?
Yeah.
And if not, it probably will come to you at some point. Because that's just how life goes sometimes,
Well, and I feel like, I forget who I was talking with this about, but you can love your home until you start watching HGTV. Like you can be so
Yeah.
grateful. And it's like, you know what? I can't believe I have this really great apartment. I love it. I couldn't remember a time when I couldn't imagine being in a place like this or fill in the blank. And then you watch HGTV.
Get on Zillow or Realtor app and you
Yeah.
see all like the multi-million-dollar homes that are like
Yes.
move-in ready. You wouldn't want to fix a darn thing.
Not one thing. And then you're just like, everything I have sucks.
Yeah.
I should paint my walls this color, not this color. And
Yeah.
I need new blankets. And where it's like,
I don't want to have to
I don't
redo the
want to-
kitchen.
yeah. And it's like, oh, but when you were just thankful like 4 days ago until you saw
Yeah.
something. So I think that's,
Planted a little seed,
yup. And I think one way I think I have struggled with comparison is actually like, I know you mentioned something within church, but I remember feeling like I was really struggling comparing that my spiritual life didn't look like those around me and thinking like, oh, am I spiritually failing? And like comparing that way. I think that was something that like I feel like I've just kind of started to come out of expecting, well, my life should look like this. It should flow this way. It's doing that for everyone else. Versus being like, well, maybe God wants to do something different in you.
Yeah.
So I think that was, I wrote it a certain way because it made sense in my head better that way. Also comparing how God talks and walks with others. That was a big thing that I struggled with for a very long time, where I was like, sometimes it seems like he talks to them all the time in this way and I don't hear him that way. Or maybe sometimes I hear him that way, or when people would come up and be like, oh, God did this and this and he said this and I felt this. I'm like, cool. I'm looking for I'm looking for him to show me those things, but it just wasn't happening as much as other people. And I just remember thinking like, what's wrong with me, am I doing something wrong that I'm not hearing him in these ways? Because like I'm asking to hear you in these ways. I'm asking you to come in and like show me and lead me and guide me. And then it kind of is one of those things of like, well, I'm not them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think there's very different if like I'm allowing separation in my life from God, but like
Well,
that's different, but in a way of, does that
Well,
make sense?
Yeah, but let's dig into that a little bit more. So tell me
Yeah.
about a time where you thought, things would be better if your circumstance changed. And so you may have done something to change it and it turned out that things were like not actually better.
Like where something happened and it didn't end up well.
Yeah.
Mm.
Like, have you ever thought, and usually this happens when we don't go to God when we're like, I'm about to do something.
Right. I can think, yeah. I think right after it was like fresh post divorce,
Uh-huh.
I remember one of my counselors said, "Hey Maria, don't make any major life decisions or jump into anything within like the first year."
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, "Well, I feel great. This makes sense." And I think people around me.
So I'm gonna date.
So I'm gonna try this out. And people around me were like, "Hey, maybe you should heal some more," or like that just seems really odd. Like it just doesn't, like something about it just doesn't fit kind of thing. And I was just like, you don't, like, you're putting me in this box. I mean, like all these things, which is hard because in the moment, like I did feel better. But then, oh man, when it didn't work out, it was like compound pain.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I get why now
Yeah.
that they like that. I mean, just general rule of thumb, like why they say like don't get into anything for a year after divorce.
Yeah.
Because Philip, shout out to you, Philip, is just so great of being like, it's compound. It's the same kind of injury in the same spot, even though it's not, it'd be like if you broke your ankle and then sprained your ankle right on top of it. Like it's going to hurt worse because you already have an injury in the same spot. So
Yeah.
I would say that would be one where I was like, I swore. And I think now that's why I can get hypersensitive on the other side of, but my struggle of like the people pleasing side of like making sure, well, what does everybody think around me?
Everybody else think?
What does everybody else think
what I
about
did?
this? Because I like didn't necessarily pay attention to that as much before, and it blew up in my face.
Yeah.
So like trying to, but then again, you can't also just lean on that either.
Yeah.
Like there's that whole kind of thing because God might genuinely be asking you to do something crazy.
Yeah.
So I would say that would be one for me. What about you?
I think I talked about this in our episode. I think it was called "It Didn't Go as Planned."
Mm-hmm.
When I thought I was so sure I was going to nail the LSAT and go to law school and then go off, be in the FBI, do all this stuff.
Do all the FBI things.
I just wanted to be in like behavioral sciences. Like I really wanted to do profiling and stuff, and
Okay.
just didn't happen. So naturally, I'm a planner, and if I have a plan, I always have a plan A, and then I usually have a plan B, and then a plan C, and a C point two,
and then all the way through
maybe
F,
even a
just
D,
in case.
just in case. But it was like I had. Let's see. I'm trying to think of I had already taken the LSAT a couple of times. And things were just not moving as fast as I wanted them to. And I did not like my scores. I had already applied to a bunch of law schools, but I hadn't heard back from a bunch of them. But I was like, I don't know if this is actually going to work out. And sometimes schools don't respond at all. So I was like, I'm not going to put my life on hold just for this.
Right.
And so I went to plan B, which was talk to my bosses about a management position. And of course they were like, we don't have anything here in Des Moines because it's taken by all the managers that you work with. And they were like, but let me my boss at the time was like, let me reach out to, I got a couple of contacts, let's see. And then I interviewed with the store manager in the Franklin, Tennessee location. And then I went down to Kansas City to do an interview for the Kansas City location. And I ultimately ended up choosing Kansas City. And of course, I didn't involve God in any of my plans, as I have mentioned many times. But I can't stress that enough, how what happens. But my gosh, the time that followed, like the following year and a half after that, was probably one of the most difficult. I mean, after that was, maybe my divorce tops that for sure. But that was a close second. But prior to my divorce, that was like the hardest year I had ever been through. And it was just constant. Like one bad or awful thing happening after another. And it wasn't really it wasn't my personal life. It was just everything in my professional life. It was like any possible mistake that could have been made. I had all of like the worst shifts. I was working, like 80 hours a work week, and I was just running myself ragged. And so, but I thought at the time, I was like, well, I have plan B, so I can just move on to this one and it'll be fine. And besides, this can like teach me some skills. I'll be able to put, that I have management experience on my resume, all this stuff. It'll be fine. And I don't know that I necessarily thought like that the grass would be greener, but I was like, hey, I have this plan, because if this doesn't work out, like I have a safety net. Like I know what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to be too far from home. So if things really, really hit the fan, then I guess I can come back to Iowa with my tail between my legs and maybe start over and,
if I had to,
scheme something else
up
for my life. But yeah, that was like a big one. I would say, the grass was greener after my divorce, though.
Yeah.
I guess to say, when you've been in a relationship,
probably just actually got to where there was grass, not gravel.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you're like, this could even be brown grass.
Yeah.
But this is grass. It's not hard rock.
Yeah. You listeners, I know a lot of you know what I'm talking about. You can sympathize, or at the very least empathize, that if you're just in a bad enough situation that you're like, well, literally anything that happens as soon as I get out of this is going to be better. And like, that was kind of my viewpoint, and it ended up being right. But this time it was also like, I had the confidence knowing that I could move forward because I had a serious conversation with God, and I was like, listen, I will do what I need to do. I will turn my life around, albeit slowly, but I will turn my life around. I will make some changes. I need to start involving you. I understand the error of my ways, all this stuff. And then God was like, bet. So let me help you out here.
Let's begin.
Yeah. So, that was pretty pivotal. That would probably be the only situation that I would say, because you often hear this when it comes to like fidelity within relationships, like in the marriage relationship. I mean, and these days it's like, you don't even have to be married to experience somebody not understanding what it means to be faithful,
right,
to someone, even though you're not married to them. It's like, okay, grass is always greener, and that happens with, the more, I'm going back to the thought about what you were saying about houses, like, oh, you're so grateful for your house, whatever. And it's like, then the Realtor app and Zillow came on the scene. And then you're like looking through all these photos of all these beautiful homes that are maybe just a little bit more than what you spent. And you're like, dang it, I could have been in this house. That has another bedroom. Why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? And the same thing goes within like a romantic relationship or marriage where, something happens, maybe some, like, it doesn't even have to be anything major. It's just something very slight, because that's how the enemy works, right? It's just
I picked this person for the rest of my life.
Just a slight little irritation or thing that's like, and then all of a sudden the thought comes, I bet somebody else wouldn't do that. I bet this person's wife doesn't talk to them like that. I bet this person's spouse doesn't do this. Or so-and-so, she gets along with her boyfriend so great. Like, they're so wonderful. He's such a wonderful person.
Do you think, and I feel like this is something that I've seen just observationally, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, because I have been wrong from quite a few times in
I
life.
am often wrong.
I am
but
often wrong.
I am more times right than I am wrong, but I am often.
But I feel like I've noticed this.
Can't believe you let me say that. You didn't even try to challenge me.
Nope. Like, no, you're pretty spot on a lot of times. But I feel like I've noticed this trend just with dating now. And I know, like, we've talked about it in multiple episodes, like how online dating, how people are kind of like diminishing people to just next, what's next. But I've also seen it when people actually like get to know one another, where it's like, oh, this person has 70% of everything I wanted.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I see somebody else who might have 72% of what I want. So I'm going to drop the 70, go for the 72 just in case. And then it's like all of a sudden now you're playing numbers with people and you're trying to like literally build this perfect person that doesn't exist. And I feel like I just see that happening where it's like you see people like letting go of really great people, or like not giving really awesome people a chance because they might be at 70, not 72% of what you quote unquote want. And I'm not saying settle, but I'm saying that there's this part of like we're tossing people to the side for very small things that if you actually like invest into a person and get to know a person, they could be absolutely everything that you dreamed of, but you're still stuck on like this initial 70 or whatever.
Yeah, or it's like what do we hear a lot of people say? You hear a lot of people say, you know, for the couples who wind up, you know, just suffering silently through the marriage until their kids graduate high school or college or whatever, and then they get divorced and they're like, oh, things just weren't exciting anymore. That person, and it's interesting because you can always tell, like, oh, you're selfish, aren't you? Because they're like, oh, they just weren't exciting, and they're, you know, we used to do all this fun stuff, and it's like, where in that, I didn't hear you say anything about what you tried to do to make things continue to be exciting, in your relationship or whatever. Like, people forget, you know, and that we've talked about this before too, but it's like somehow that ideal is still being like perpetuated throughout our generation and generations after us. Like, people think that marriage is a destination and not the starting of a new journey. And it's like, we have such a skewed understanding of what marriage is.
I feel like we've glorified it in a weird way too, or like we've glorified weddings and wedding day and like I'm engaged and like which is, you have to be engaged before you get married, right?
Sure.
But like, I feel like we've glorified it to the moment, not like the lifestyle of it.
Yeah.
Like, we've glorified what the dress and the party going to be like and the ceremony and the moments. And
and it's like, that's just a day. That's just a day. And that's not going to carry you through the next 30 to 40 years.
No. And then
when things get really real, like you have kids or you get a house, but the roof caves in because a tree fell on it.
Right.
And
speaking of, I was in Winterset, or hometown.
Where's this going?
There was my old neighbor's house had a massive tree fall right through their porch and into their roof.
Oh,
when I was walking by.
Yeah. See?
So it happens.
They're dealing with it.
And it was a big old tree. Whatever. Okay, anyways, it was the yellow house, catty corner from me. Okay.
All right.
Question for you.
Yeah, go ahead with question.
Has there ever been a time that you've gotten something or you've seen or a realization that things are not always as they seem?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll just take the simplest example that I'll take is my marriage. Even though I just said everything that I said, I say all that to say, I am someone who sort of, I don't know that I was fully all in on that ideal that like marriage was the be all end all. And like, once we get married, it's going to be smooth sailing. But I thought for sure, like, when we get married, like, this is just, I mean, things are just going to like level out. And like, because I had already been with this person for, 8 years or whatever.
I was like, weren't you guys
And I was
together like 7 some years or something like
yeah,
before
8.
you? 8?
Yeah. And so it was like, I was like, in my head, I was like, well, I've already seen what this relationship has morphed into. I mean, there can't be, it can't get better.
What other surprises could come down the pipeline?
It can't get better and it can't get worse. Like, I really just had kind of that mentality of like, it's, and then, but I was really wrong. It was, it was a little, like, things got worse. As that one person says on the reel, like, things got worse. They got worse.
Okay, so taking from that aspect, and you mentioned earlier, like, the grass is always greener.
Yeah.
But the phrase also often goes, the grass is always greener where you water it.
Yeah.
So in light of that, how do we go about, like, shifting our focus to the things that are in front of us and, like, the things that, like, God's put in front of us if we know it's, and we're not saying, like, stay in something toxic. Do not get that wrong. That's not what we're saying at all.
That doesn't mean that your grass is green.
It's greener.
Your grass is not green. It's withered if it's still there.
Yeah. You're it's not grass.
You're in an
like
abusive
you're in
relationship. That's not it.
But how would you say, like, one can go about, like, switching or pivoting that?
This is where it's important to have an accountability person. Well, first of all, your main accountability person, if you're married, should be your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And you should be in a position. So this is something that I learned after my marriage that I definitely did wrong. It wasn't just me, it was both of us. But it was like, he could never open up to me, like, fully. There was so much stuff that he was hiding. There was so many things. And me, there were so many things, like, I could just tell that things were hidden, didn't know. He just wouldn't address things. Or if I tried to press on stuff, he just, like, shut down, whatever. But then I didn't try and be vulnerable myself to let him know this was a safe space for you to be vulnerable with me. I refused to share certain things about myself. But
there should be nothing uncovered.
Your spouse should be that person that you can literally, even if things aren't going great and you start thinking like, well, maybe things would be better, your first inclination should be, I need to have a conversation with my spouse about this. Be like, hey, I'm feeling weird. It feels like, here's what's going on in my head. I hate to admit this, but it should be a safe enough space to where you can say, I'm literally having these thoughts and I don't know why, or you do know why, and you need to get to the bottom of it.
I feel like if anything on this earth, that your spouse should be the one person that you can be completely, like, nothing is hidden. And
Absolutely,
it should be like
100%.
That out of all people, it should be your spouse.
Every little thing.
Yep. Every little thing.
Yeah. And then the next ideal thing would be you find a trusted, like a counselor, pastor, somebody that you guys can both talk to about whatever the issue is, why things are going the way that they're going. I would say, you have your own circle of, like, your people that hold you accountable. And you can tell certain people certain things about that, however, comfortable you feel with whatever it is you want to share with them.
Well, and I think just to add to
seeking
something,
counsel from others.
Well, I think sometimes, just to clarify this, like when Meryl's even talking about, like, holding accountable, doesn't necessarily mean, like, and it can go and be like, hey guys, messed up, I did this. But it's also this part of the group that like helps hold you when things get hard. Yeah, like it's not just the people that you go, like,
example would be if I was married, if I was married and Maria and I were as close when I was married as we are now, it would be me telling Maria, and say my situation is just completely different, whatever. Say in my next and final marriage. I go to marriage. But I would go to Maria and be like, Maria, I'm struggling with these thoughts. I'm having this. Maria holding me accountable isn't, I'm gosh,
like
I'm trying to
bashing you over your head.
Yeah, or like, oh, you're not supposed to think that way. It's Maria holding me accountable would be, have you talked to your spouse?
Yeah.
Have you talked to a pastor or a counselor? Are you guys going to therapy? Are you,
How can I be praying for you?
Yeah. How can I be praying for you? What do you need to discuss? Why do you think that way?
Yeah.
Why do you like what's going on? And then just being that supportive person and then challenging the things that they are telling you as the Holy Spirit, puts on you.
Prompts and allows.
Yeah, exactly. But that's what.
Just to clarify, like that's what you're meaning.
That's the kind of accountability. Yeah. That you would be looking for. And that's why it's so important. I can't believe how many times I've stressed this over, but I guess it's just because I didn't place as much importance on having a godly community as I have over the last 5 years or so. And now I see it's so important and it's so valuable to not only my life, but it'll be really important to my future relationships, my family, my children, it's going to have a huge impact so that you have that around you. So I can't stress enough how important it is to get plugged in to your church and just around people who are more spiritually mature than you. Or who may be on the same kind of path that you are, and you're both just seeking wisdom together.
We're trying to do this.
Yeah, we're all trying to do this life together. So
I think the thing, and I know this is also another quote about comparisons. Comparison is a thief of all joy.
Oh yeah.
And
is that a proverb?
I don't think it's a proverb, but I think it's just been something that's so quoted over time. That I can think of times that I get, even in dating, where it's I look and I was like, man, how many times I say to you, but my story isn't fill in the blanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where it's because
you have to remind yourself of that all the time.
Yeah. Where it's that, well, in my head, this is how I thought my story was going to go and how it was going to look. And now that I'm walking out and it's not looking anything like that,
LOL.
LOL. That aspect of having to learn to trust God in that way versus being I'll trust God if it all maps out and looks a specific way.
The way that I want it.
The way that I want it to, or the way that I think it should, or that I thought it should.
Yeah.
And so then that can take so much joy out of the process and what God's trying to do in me now.
Yeah.
Versus that. So I think that's something that believers, we tend to do often.
I did a devotional a while back. This was a couple years ago, called The Comparison Trap.
Ooh.
And so a quote from this that I really liked was, the comparison trap tricks us into thinking that God's blessings are in limited supply, whispering the lie that when she wins, you lose. But in today's verses, which I have down below, which I'll get to here shortly, we're reminded that God has set a unique plan for your life. And that's exactly like what you were saying, Maria. And he will abundantly prepare you for it. You can trust his provision, and this one's harder. You can trust his timing.
Mm-hmm.
When comparison makes you feel less than, like you're the only one who hasn't been picked yet, remember that God doesn't ask you to take your cues from those around you. He asks you to take your cues from him, the one who already calls you his masterpiece.
That's good.
That's something that's so hard to remember.
So hard.
I shouldn't take my cues from other people because they're not going where we're going.
No. And I think the aspect and one way that the enemy tries to get in and cause division even within believers is this, because a believer's heart would tend to be we want to do what the Lord has, right? So it's okay, me as a believer, I want to do what the Lord has, and I'm with other believers who want to do with what the Lord has, and I see blessings, what I consider blessings, being poured out upon them and not me in whatever ways, where now all of a sudden it gets to be this self-condemnation of, well, what am I doing wrong? Where am I misstepping? How come they are if I'm not? What's missing in my life? Am I doing this? And then it sends you down the spiral of versus just enjoying being with God and knowing that.
Well, and I'll take that a step further.
Go further.
I'll take that a step further in saying that it's not just self-condemnation. It's like the enemy has gotten you to only think about self.
Yeah.
Whether that's you think too highly of yourself or very
Or too
lowly
lowly
of
of
yourself as a
yourself.
result. You know, you can either be you can either be condemning and being condescending toward yourself and self-deprecating, or you can be so arrogant, and egotistical that you're like, why isn't this happening? Because I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. But guess what? Your focus is off him and what he wants you to do. It's focused
Still
on self. Yeah.
The I heard this said one time that pride isn't thinking too highly of yourself, it's thinking of yourself too often. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh, that's good. Following the same lines. It's not this. So many times we think of pride as like this arrogance, where it's like, no, it's that all I'm
just the
thinking of is
focus.
myself.
Yeah,
I'm not thinking about one other person at all.
Yeah. I think that's something that I don't know. I didn't find myself like I at one point was convicted like, yeah, you might be like thinking of yourself in a negative way, but you're still thinking of yourself a lot here. And like, so I don't know why, but I thought that maybe, I guess maybe my line of thinking in that was like, well, I'm thinking poorly of myself. So because
I don't want to think too highly.
Because I'm being condescending toward myself, it's like, you know, I'm in agreement with like, oh, this is why things aren't happening. So because I'm a pile of crap and I'm just like not a great person.
I'm a failure. Yeah, of course.
And I didn't see anything wrong with that for a long time. And it was like, well, no wonder.
Wow.
Look at your attitude. You don't even like being around you. So
Right.
I didn't expect God to move.
Do you?
Wilson?
I have a question.
What?
Do you? Okay, so in dating now, do you ever struggle with, because of the way the dating world works now and because of what you've been through, do you ever struggle with when you see other women who may or may not, or where you would think, what would stop my man from going and pursuing them?
Oh.
Or what would, could that be tempting for him? Or
I don't think that. No.
Okay, I just don't know if that was.
I don't think about like what could be tempting for him. I just think like, well, why not? Of course. Like, I mean, I always revert to there's no reason why you even deserve any of the things that you deserve because you are just not super great. Like, that's just like the
default if you don't watch your thoughts.
That's my usual default. Default? Whatever that word is. Default.
Default is the defective thought, guys.
There. That's funny.
New word, default.
But yeah, I have something that I have learned in dating is that when I have an insecure moment, when I do struggle with those thoughts, I have to call that out and express that to the guy that I'm dating. And I'm usually looked at like,
what?
Sometimes I just don't even look at him when I'm telling him because I'm like, I don't want to look at you because this is so, I know how unhinged I sound, but right now
I'm getting it out.
You just need to hear it. And one of the times when I was going through one of those little spells was he had responded with like, okay, well, what do you need from me to like help so that you're not doing that? And that was a very shocking response. I've never dated anybody that has ever said that to me or has, I mean, I don't know. I was floored by that. I was like, I don't, well, maybe work on your communication skills a little bit.
Can your communication skills get better? Thanks.
When you say you're going to be here in a little while, can you like tell me if it's going to be 3 hours or 1?
Right. Or like, maybe 20 minutes, ideal?
Yeah.
Like you're on your way, but it's just going to be a minute yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's something that I've learned is like, I can't be quiet about that anymore because when I would have those thoughts and feelings in my previous relationship with my ex-husband, I bottled all of that. I bottled all of those thoughts and I just allowed the enemy to continue planting negative self-thoughts about myself. And so I thought I'm the problem. So
And then at
I
that
don't know
point
what I'm
too,
going to do to fix me, but I am the issue here.
every thought seems very true and real. Like, well, yeah, no, proved it again.
Checks out.
Proved
He
it
doesn't
again.
even want to engage in conversation with me. He doesn't even care that I'm upset about something because, like, of course, because I am too much. I am too loud. I'm too confrontational. I'm too angry.
Fill in the blank
Yeah.
to whatever in that moment
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
The
What about you? That's a good question.
yeah, I feel like I do sometimes, especially knowing that like the realm of like employment that the guy I'm talking to is in.
Oh, okay.
I struggle because it's like
He's in the service industry.
he's in the service industry. So I think that there's some aspects where I get like,
Say, if you don't say, people are just gonna be like,
oh yeah, sorry,
What
I
was
was
he
just
doing? What's
he's
he
in the
doing?
service. He's in the service industry. So I get where it's like all these people walk into their establishment all the time, and it's
Yeah.
like, I don't look like that. I don't dress like that. I don't carry myself that way. I'm not that forward. And like, sometimes I think like as a man, that would be so hard to resist all the time.
Yeah.
And so, but like you said, I think a huge thing is calling it out, because there are sometimes I've had to, and it's been met with like nothing but like similar to you, like of a,
It's the worst.
like, that's not even, what did he say? One time he said, he was like, Maria, like they're like, that's all fake. Like, it's all fake. Like, that's not even anything that would be like, like, he's like, it is fake. It's not attractive. Like, that's not even attractive to me.
I'm always prefacing it with like, all right, I gotta tell you something that's very uncomfortable for me, but I really need you to just hear it. So
just listen, hear me
just
out.
listen.
But I think sometimes like that's something that's and because of like what I've been through too, mine happened really quick. And I remember in my marriage, I remember approaching my husband at the time and being like, hey, I know you say this is nothing, but this is what I see. And then it was met with, of course it's not anything, you know? And so then like, I just have this extra, okay,
Yeah.
so you say that, but what's really happening versus
Yeah.
relearning trust, which I've been called out on.
Yeah.
As before, whereas like, he even said to me 1.2, at what point are you going to decide if you're going to trust me or not? And I was like, oh, valid point.
Well.
So anyways,
Yikes.
I was like, it was one of those where I was like, you're not wrong. Like, no, how do you say it? Well, you have to decide at some point if you're going to trust me or not. Like, basically, like that's going to be on you. Like, I can't
do anything about it.
I can reassure you. I can give you everything that you need, but
Yeah.
I
At
can't make
some
you do
point, it's like, it's okay to ask for the reassurance and stuff. But in my opinion, at least in my own area, I'm like, okay, I can allow myself to seek out that reassurance, but there's an expiration date for that reassurance, because I'm not going to sit here and pester this person over and over and over and over to validate my feelings. Because if I do that, then I am expecting him to manage my feelings.
And that's not on him to do.
It's not on him
That's
to do.
exhausting.
Yeah.
Like, they can help, but they're not in control
Yeah.
of that. That's us.
And I want to say that for anybody that does struggle with that, because that can be a slippery slope in and of itself.
Yeah. Should we read some scripture?
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Wow.
Read my mind.
Okay.
Okay, so what I was thinking about, James 3:16 was the verse that I was thinking about when it was like, the comparison often gets you just thinking about yourself. And so this verse kind of speaks to that. So it says, for where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. Oh, well, okay, James.
Could you say it any clearer, bro?
I don't think we need to say anything else about that.
Nope. 1 Corinthians 2:9 says, however, as it is written, what no eye has seen and what no ear has heard and what no human mind has conceived, the things God has prepared for those who love him.
That's nice.
So like, you might not see it, but God does. And it's, you don't know what's coming your way.
Yeah.
In the good, in the realm of good.
Yep. Ephesians 2:10, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do.
Not just happenstance.
Which begs to be repeated just stay in your lane.
Stay in
How
your
about
lane,
that?
bro.
Stay in your lane and just be focused straight ahead.
Mhm.
Don't be looking at other
Oh.
people around you, because God's already prepared in advance for you to do something.
Right. And that makes me think, I used to be a avid runner, and I would run long distance races. So it may be in a marathon or half marathon. And then there would be like 10Ks that would be happening at the same time. And these people would be flying past you, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like I'm doing terrible. And then if you would just stop and take a second and look at their bib, you would realize they're not running the same race. So the way that they run their race is drastically different. You run a 10K far faster than you run a 26.2 mile race.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're just, I don't know, that's a little sporting example, but it's just that side of, if I'm not looking at like their bib, because usually your bib will be a different color or something that would distinguish that you're in a different race.
Mm-hmm.
And they do have different start times, but sometimes the paths cross where they're similar in the path, in the course. Yeah. And so you're like, this person's flying and doesn't look exhausted, but they're not running the same race.
Right.
It's just a matter of, you got to figure that out.
Yeah. I think about driving when I was younger, and my dad just being like, eyes on the road, because it's, wherever your eyes go off the road for too long, that's where you start steering.
Yep.
And so you often find yourself veering off the path. Oh, look at that. God is always giving us real life examples of what.
Don't text and drive. Shameless plug.
How about that?
Okay. Romans 12:6, it says we have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift is prophesying, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. Focus on what's in front of you rather than what others have going on. Are you being a good steward of your gifts? Which I think is a great question.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically this idea is like God gave you gifts that he doesn't give everybody.
Right.
And I think if you look at the world big picture, like we each have little elements of God in us. So it's like the thing that, like the person that's sitting across from you or the person in the car while you're listening to this, they have things in them that God put in them that are specific to them and their call. Yeah. Just like you have something that might look different because your call is going to be different. No one's called to do the exact same thing.
Yep. 1 Timothy 6:6-8 says, but godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we'll be content with that. That's just to say, that's just a great reminder of like, some of the stuff that we're focusing on right now isn't going to matter 10 years,
right.
6 months from now. That thing that you are stressing about because somebody else is doing something better, they've got something that you want or whatever. It's like, how do you know a month from now, 3 weeks, 2 weeks from now, you could be going through something very similar.
That
like
reminds me.
Idea.
Yeah. Well, and now I'm kind of kicking myself that I got rid of the pair of boots, but it reminds me of, this was years ago, and it was a pair of boots that I wanted. I wanted them for Christmas so bad. Couldn't find them. All these different things. Then found them, got them for Christmas. I maybe wore them twice and then gave them, but it was in the moment. I had to have these boots. And that's kind of what happens where it's like, we get this and it's not what we thought, or we lose our satisfaction with something very quickly if it's off. Yeah. Kind of thing. Yep. Now we are on James 1:17. Mm-hmm. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. That's good. I've been focusing on that part of James 1:17 where it says he does not change like shifting shadows, where it's like we can trust him. Like he's not going to like flip flop games on us. He's not going to tell you one thing and then do something different, or he's not going to change his mind 18 times in your process. Like he's not here to confuse. Like he doesn't shift. So whatever that's worth, if that's worth anything, that's been something I've been thinking about.
2 Corinthians 10:12 speaks to, when we compare ourselves, we lack understanding. And it says, not that we dare to classify or compare ourselves with some of those who are commending themselves, but when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they are without understanding. Well, so basically, if you're wasting time comparing yourself to other people and what's going on in their lives, he's basically calling you a fool. Yeah. Paul is calling you a fool. Watch out. It's a foolish thing to do. It is. It just is. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. It's a waste of mental space. Those there's I mean, you see all kinds of like reels and social media stuff where it's like, this lives rent free in my head. Like you're giving people and their situations like space in your head rent free.
Yeah.
When you're comparing yourself to them.
One of my very best friends, she said this to me because this was, oh my gosh, this was a couple years ago when I liked somebody else. And I was really nervous. I hadn't seen them in years and I was going to see them again. And she just said to me, and it stuck with me for like life. She said, Maria, don't rob someone of the gift that is you.
That's good.
And I just love that idea of, not that like we're perfect or anything, but there's things that are in us that are gifts. And when we aren't true to ourselves, like we rob people of the opportunity to get to know the gifts that are in us and who we are.
Yep.
And so I just thought that was really cool. Just
more.
that way, Psalm 139, it lines right up with that. It says, because God made you just the way he wanted. It says, I praise you for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows this very well.
It's good. Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. These are the proper things to be thinking on instead of comparing yourself to what people have that you don't have.
Yep. And then Romans 12:2, it says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. By that you are testing and may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. What does that mean? We have to change what we think about. We have to think about what we think about in that kind of way.
Yeah.
And we need to submit who we are and our view of ourselves to God and let him define us, not what people around us and what culture is saying to us.
Yeah, that's good.
I have this scripture listed here, and this is Isaiah 43:19. And sometimes when we get into comparison things and we look at where other people are, I just would kind of want to encourage you with this verse. And it says, see, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I'm making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. And my favorite part is I'm doing like something new, and do you not perceive it? So if we keep our eyes on all these other things, we will miss out on what God is doing.
Yeah. It's good.
So just my thoughts on that.
I have no other thoughts.
I don't either.
All right.
All right.
Guys.
Gang.
Well, thanks for hanging out with
Thanks
us.
for hanging out with us. We appreciate you listening.
Yeah. Let us know what you think.
We hope that, if anything, these scripture too. Put the scripture, write them down. Go look at them. Put them on note cards if you struggle with this. Take a second and
on them as you should.
Do that. Let us know.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it, as they say.
As they say. All right. We'll see you guys later.
Bye.